People at Marvel. Asking Spider-Man at the beginning. Chapter 41. It won't be a human experiment, will it? Seeing the arrangement in the picture, and the man who was tied, Stark asked with a frown. I guess it is. Peter Parker nodded. He had seen the laboratories of Osborn Enterprises and knew which companies would make arrangements when conducting human experiments. Although those are legal and have been signed by the experimenters with voluntary contracts, there is actually no difference in the picture. Injections. A voice came from the picture. Then, one of the scientists in a white coat went straight forward, extracted a tube of red substance, walked up to the experimenter, and injected it into his neck. At first, the experimenter seemed to have nothing to do, and stared at the scientist for a while. But a few seconds later, suddenly a heart-rending scream sounded. Ah! What is this? Get him out of me! Quote. Ah! Ah! This scream made both Stark and Peter Parker outside the picture feel as if they were in the scene and felt his pain. It's terrifying. After screaming for a while, the experimenter directly glowed red, and then the whole person emitted light, like a small bomb that would explode at any time. Enough! Let's go here, let's go. In the picture, there was a voice that did not know who it was, and then everyone in those laboratories fled in a hurry. A few seconds later, a dazzling light flickered, causing Stark and Peter Parker to close their eyes off the screen. Then there was a loud bang and the picture disappeared. The camera should have been damaged by the explosion, and I think the symptoms of the experimenter are exactly the same as the weird explosion that happened before. Stark deduced as he looked at the picture. Listening to his words, Peter Parker was silent with a heavy look. It was also the first time he had seen such a dehumanizing experiment. Although after the explosion that nearly killed Harpy, the surveillance video at the scene saw a person leave directly, indicating that the initiator was not dead. However, the experimenter on the picture that the two saw just now was the first person to use that strange agent, and it was not stable, and it could be said that the mortality rate was 100%. And this is only the first record seen. There are more than hundreds of other large and small documents, and how many deaths are recorded in it. This made Peter Parker feel even heavier because he took the C and was not good. Hey, kid. Feeling Peter Parker's emotions, Stark came directly across from Parker and said to him, You have to remember, we are not only dealing with those strange aliens, or those gods of Asgard Warnheim, or some other place, but also these ill-intentioned on Earth. You have to make yourself stronger, and even if you adhere to the principle of not killing, you should have the consciousness that you will be killed by others, or that you will see others kill. After saying 2 sentences, Stark saw Peter Parker's expression soften a little, and finally said, It's really not okay. You go back first. Don't you have the Infinity Gauntlet? I'll call you when I need you, you can just teleport me back. Hearing this, Peter Parker, who was still depressed, immediately raised his head and shook his head resolutely. It is precisely because of these people who are suffering that I want to join the Avengers, and this Killian I must send him to prison. That's good. Stark nodded in satisfaction, patted Peter Parker lightly on the shoulder, then walked to the computer and sent all the information in Killian's system to Nick Fury's computer. Now he is not fighting alone, but backed by S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Alliance. If all these materials can be sent to Nick Fury, S.H.I.E.L.D. can not only grasp the evidence of Killian's crime, but also find Killian's hidden location through the clues in the picture. Even where Killian is now, he can be found. After the data was sent, Stark exited the AIM organization system without a trace, and then lay on the bed with his head on his back, quietly waiting for news from Nick Fury. A few hours later, the phone rang, and when Stark picked it up and answered it, it was Nick Fury's voice. We found Killian's location, he should be in a port now, I will send you Killian's location immediately. After saying this, the fierce Nick Fury directly hung up the phone. And Stark's side also immediately received the positioning. It's time to act. Stark jumped out of bed, led Peter Parker outside, rented a car, and drove towards the location. Meanwhile, port. In the office, Killian returned to his desk with the syringe, knocked on the glass tube above, and smiled with satisfaction. Then he looked back at the tied woman and said, I think Stark has the ability to be an unknown prophet and know that I am going to attack his Stark building, but I don't think he has this ability, otherwise how could he not know that I kidnapped his woman? At this time, where Killian looked was the kidnapped Pepper. Pepper was not in good condition at this time, covered in red blood, except for the absence of those lava patterns on his face. The others were similar to the two people Stark had met before. You don't think it's good to kidnap me, do you? Stark is behind the entire Avengers. He can't influence too many things, let alone just give up capturing you just because you have me as a hostage. Pepper said calmly. No, I didn't think kidnapping you would be of any use, so I injected you with a desperate virus to make you like us, and I didn't expect Stark to contain the Avenger, I just wanted to disgust him. Korean said with a smile. He looked very proud, but Pepper was now tied up, and he really couldn't move, so he could only say coldly, if you want to disgust him, then you really did it. Of course, a few years ago, I went to visit this famous Mr. Stark, humbly wanted to ask him to give me a little time to talk to him. Stark agreed, he asked me to wait on the rooftop. I waited until midnight, and he didn't come. Kieran recalled the past, clenching his fists tightly, looking like he was gritting his teeth. It can be seen that Stark's release of his pigeons has indeed deeply affected Killian. Later, it made Killian determined to study the desperate virus and then take revenge on Stark. All in all, without Stark there would be no me where I am now, and I have to thank him. Killian said with an eerie smile. Just as he was about to say something, a subordinate hurried over and placed a tablet in front of Killian. On the screen, two figures slowly walked into the port, looking around, as if looking for something. At the same time, out of their not a see place on the screen, a group of centaurs is slowly approaching, trying to dispose of the two uninvited guests. It's Stark, he's coming. A puzzled look appeared on Killian's face. When he originally arranged this port, he processed a lot of relevant information and erased a lot of traces for concealment and safety, so that he could hide under the investigation of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers. But I didn't expect that no matter how careful I was, it would still be exposed. There are even more terrible things. Has our database been hacked? Killian looked at his subordinates and asked. In his opinion, the only way to quickly locate his location is through a database. It should be that our technical expert just called and said that there was an unauthorized access record, which saw a lot of video, and transmitted all the information to an IP address in New York. We have investigated, that IP address is near S.H.I.E.L.D. After the subordinate finished reporting, he immediately waited for Killian's order. I see, these are really shady enough to hack into my database. Garen grumbled. Stark is not as good as you. After all, you can kidnap a woman and inject this woman with a desperate virus in order to achieve your goal. Pepper chimed in next to him. Listening to Pepper's words, Killian immediately became angry and roared. Stark is not a decent gentleman either. He released my pigeon and made me wait upstairs for most of the night. Yes, just because he released your pigeons, you are going to kidnap his girlfriend, and you are really justified in this reason. Pepper retorted. Kieran wanted to say something more, but realized that he and Pepper were just a waste of time to continue talking nonsense, so he swallowed and looked at his subordinates instead. After thinking for a while, Korean ordered, surround them and get rid of them. But, after all, this is a port, if we kill people here. The subordinates were a little worried. Less nonsense, you just do it for me. Killian said coldly, then put on his clothes, grabbed his weapon, and was ready to join the battle against Stark. At the same time, he was keeping an eye on the man who had come with Stark. He knew that the man's name was Peter Parker, and he had investigated a lot of information about Parker, but he didn't expect that this guy was wearing a strange glove on his hand. It remains to be seen what exactly this glove does. Come out, don't hide. Peter Parker, who was on the march, sensed the enemies around him and shouted loudly. Immediately, those who were still hiding and wanted to sneak up on them knew that they did not have this opportunity, so they all came out and met Stark and Peter Parker. When they came out, they still did not forget their mission, and surrounded the two on the march, ready to destroy them at any time. You've all been injected with the desperate virus. Stark scanned the crowd and asked. It seems that you already know the name of the virus, the database must have been invaded by you, and you will also know the power of the desperate virus in a while. The leader said coldly. After the two sides simply said two words, they immediately began to move. Those who surrounded Stark and Peter Parker were not here to chat. And Stark and Peter Parker also knew that this trip was dangerous, so they had long been ready to fight, and they were too lazy to talk nonsense, and directly started fighting. First, the sniper hiding in the shadows was the first to shoot, and a bullet went diagonally above Peter Parker. Peter Parker originally wanted to dodge using the Infinity Gauntlet, but considering that this was a whole card, he chose to dodge anyway. There was originally spider sensing, and Peter Parker, who felt the bullet flying, easily dodged successfully. "So you can hide," the sniper complained, and then put down the sniper rifle. By this time, the two sides had entered into a dogfight and there was no chance to shoot again. Peter Parker roamed through the enemies, occasionally spraying spider silk to control those enemies, while Stark was wearing a war armor and pouring fire on the armor. The two people cooperated perfectly, and after a burst of cooperation, these people who were injected with the desperate virus were all crushed. But these people did not fall to the ground after lying down, unconscious, but quickly recovered from their injuries and immediately stood up. "What the hell, are these people undead?" Peter Parker asked, puzzled. "I don't know, but if we continue to stalemate like this, it is estimated that there is no way to find Killian, so it is better to calculate," Stark said inside the communicator. Immediately, the two of them thought of the same method, no longer continued to attack, and directly looked for an opportunity to be defeated by the enemy. Then, Killian's men, who thought they had succeeded, immediately set up Peter Parker and Stark and sent them to the port office. Pepper. While being tied to the pillar, Stark saw the woman opposite him and recognized her identity at a glance. Tony. Pepper looked at Stark stunned, with a look of surprise, obviously unable to understand why Stark was also arrested. However, after seeing Stark's calm expression, Pepper immediately realized that Stark was not defeated, but had his own way, so he let go. "Stark. We finally met." When Kieran saw Stark, he said hello with an excited expression, and then suddenly changed his face, showing an extremely angry expression, and said coldly, "I still admired you very much at the beginning, but now you are my prisoner, and in my opinion, you are not a powerful character." "Really? I don't see it necessarily." Stark pretended to be tough, while thinking about ways to deal with Killian. "Let's meet honestly." Killian couldn't get used to Stark's armor, so he stepped forward, and a fire appeared in his right hand, covering the armor. And Stark, who was located inside the warframe, immediately felt the blazing heat. The warframe is a confined space, and this high temperature directly burns the warframe like a furnace, and Stark can no longer bear it, so he takes the initiative to open the warframe and drop it. "Mr. Stark." Seeing Stark fall out of the armor, Peter Parker shouted worriedly, thinking that it was Kieran who used some means to make Stark delirium, otherwise how could he take the initiative to open the armor? But Stark coughed and stood up, nothing but sweat soaked in sweat. Just now, Killian put his hand on the warframe, and then gradually heated up, and actually directly heated the warframe's system, and of course Stark inside the warframe was too hot, and opening the warframe was due to survival instinct. "I'm okay. Ahem. Ahem." Stark coughed and stood up, taking a few deep breaths of air to ease his mood. "It's your turn." Jillian came to Peter Parker and put a hand on the chest of the spider armor. Then the hands gradually turned crimson, and the temperature gradually increased, and even the people standing next to them could feel the hot temperature. But this temperature is nothing to mithril silver. Peter Parker inside the armor looked at Killian indifferently, watching him gradually change from a smug expression to sweating, and then put his hands on the armor at the same time. At this time, the room was as hot as a stove, and Killian's hands had completely turned red, but nothing had happened. "That's it. Are you at this level?" Peter Parker smiled contemptuously. "Forget it." Killian withdrew his hand, wiped the sweat, and then angrily punched Peter Parker in the face. But at this time, Peter Parker was wearing a spider armor made of mithril silver, and this punch did not hurt him, but broke Killian's 5-finger bones. Although the painful teeth grinned, Jillian still forcibly endured the pain out of face and did not shout. In the end, Korean didn't have the heart to delay. He grabbed Stark's neck, lifted it high, and said coldly, "I will kill you first now, no one can stop me, no one can." As he spoke, Killian's hand strained, and at the same time his hand became hot, making Stark unable to breathe, and burns appeared on his neck. Seeing this, Peter Parker couldn't continue to look, and he then wanted to use the power of the space gem to teleport out. But just a few seconds later, Killian put down Stark, as if he suddenly had another idea, and laughed. I don't think it should be so easy for you to die, I want to play something else. Quote. What else can you do, ahem? Stark asked as he gasped and stood up. Of course it's this. Killian pointed to his body, and then lava patterns appeared all over his body, and the whole person burst into dazzling light. Stark and Peter Parker, who had seen the information of AIM's organizational system at this time, immediately realized what Killian was going to do. Undoubtedly, it was a harbinger of the self-detonation. Tony. Pepper snorted sadly, struggling to get close to Stark, thinking that the two would die together. But Stark's face was calm, there was no emotion at all, and he turned to look at Peter Parker. The latter nodded, the infinity gauntlet on his hand shone, and just as the flames after Killian's explosion swept through the office, Pepper, Stark and Peter Parker disappeared directly in place. At the moment of self-explosion, Killian saw the strange scene of the three people suddenly disappearing, but at this time it was too late to react, and the next second it exploded directly. The violent explosion also affected other subordinates in the office, who also blew themselves up. A series of explosions appeared on the port, directly knocking over a large area where the office was located, and there were broken walls and rubble everywhere. In the ruins, a dozen mutilated figures struggled to stand up, and although their bodies were full of holes, they were being repaired at a very fast speed. Soon, Killian could speak, and he pointed at Stark who was watching the battle outside and roared, "You fool, you even have a backhand. That's of course, deal with you gang of miscellaneous, just can't be too straight, thank you for your dazzling performance." Stark looked at Killian and the others with a smile. And when Killian heard his words, he was angry, and before he could finish replying, he limped out of the ruins. As he progresses, his body recovers, and eventually fully recovers, and he can run towards Stark. While running, he roared, "I will melt you into a blood mist. Forget it, it's not realistic." Stark smiled contemptuously, and then all the parts of the anti-Hulk armor flew in the sky, directly assembled into a complete armor, and after Stark entered it, Killian also rushed in front of him. Stark manipulated the anti-Hulk armor to punch directly, knocking Killian backwards and flying out more than 10 meters, and then his face was dented, and an energy beam shot towards Killian. Airplanes. The roar continued to sound, and Killian was destroyed and reborn countless times in the beam, until he was beaten into a pool of slag by Stark. He is still not dead, but it is impossible to get up again in a short time. After solving Killian, Stark and Peter Parker began to deal with his men. And those subordinates saw that Killian was also defeated, and suddenly the dragons were leaderless, attacked indiscriminately, and were defeated one by Peter Parker and Stark, and finally chose to retreat although they could be reborn indefinitely. Tony. Korean is not dead yet. Pepper shouted, pointing to the pool of reconverging slag. Hearing this, Stark looked at Peter Parker and reminded, "Your warframe can breathe in space, see what I mean?" Got it. Peter Parker nodded and rushed directly to Killian, and then the whole person teleported to the moon together with Killian, who had just gathered apart. At this time, Garen had gathered into a general shape, and he instinctively wanted to attack Peter Parker, but he could not transfer heat in the vacuum, let alone breathe. Killian opened his mouth to say something, but soon fell into a state of suffocation and passed out directly. After waking up, he still wanted to struggle to get up, but again because of suffocation and coma, he kept repeating reincarnation, although Killian can be reborn, but it is also repeated between death and resurrection. Peter Parker then returned directly to Earth, leaving Killian alone on the moon. This is the only way to deal with people who can't die. It's solved, but we still need to collect the incriminating evidence now, and then return to Stark Tower immediately. Stark ordered, and he rushed to the ruins alone and looked around. Eventually, he discovers a basement filled with cultured desperate viruses. These things have to be taken away. As Stark spoke, he packed up all the viruses and strains, as well as the plants that made the desperate virus, and prepared to take them with him. These things will be the key evidence against Killian and the entire organization behind it. While Stark was searching for something, the phone sounded and he picked it up to connect it. On the other side of the phone, came the voice of the war machine. "Tony, I discovered one thing, Mandarin is not really behind it, although he declared war on the country, he is just a clown who has been manipulated." As he said this, the war machine gasped violently, as if it had just experienced a life and death battle. However, the news that the war machine found was not very timely, because Stark found a letter with Killian in Mandarin's correspondence. In the above content, Killian does not say anything in the capacity of guidance or cooperation, but in the tone of command, let Mandarin do things. I know, Mandarin is controlled, the person behind it is Kieran of the AIM organization. I have now found evidence about Killian, and I will return to S.H.I.E.L.D. immediately. With that, Stark hung up the phone, took all the information he found, took Pepper's hand by the way, and nodded towards Peter Parker. Let's go. Peter Parker comes to Stark and Pepper and uses the space gem. In the next second, the three were teleported back to S.H.I.E.L.D. together. At this time, Nick Fury was investigating things in the office, and when he saw the three people who suddenly appeared, he was not surprised, pointed to the seats in front of him, and signaled them to sit down and talk. Fury, these are the evidence that Killian is behind the manipulation of Mandarin and the creation of the desperate virus, which involves human experimentation and terrorist attacks. Stark placed a large pile of materials and documents on Nick Fury's desk. The latter picked up the information and looked at it, nodded. I understand, don't worry, I will immediately provide these materials to the above, so that they can make a judgment against Killian and the AIM organization behind it. That's good. Stark nodded in satisfaction. But he knew that the process must be long because it was complicated. But it doesn't matter, now Killian is trapped on the moon, he can't come back at all, and he can't do anything, so it doesn't matter if he waits. I also know the intelligence on the side of the war machine. Mandarin is just a puppet, the real mastermind behind the scenes is Killian. I will also report this matter directly to the above, and then I can characterize AIM as an illegal organization and strike directly. Nick Fury said indifferently. For this kind of organization that dreams of destroying the world, or conquering the world, Nick Fury has dealt with a lot, so he is not very surprised. And this calmness also influenced Stark, allowing him to set his sights on other more important things. Director Fury, I'm going to take a week off with Pepper. Don't look for me for anything during this time, thank you. After saying this, Stark put his arm around the frightened little Pepper and said to Peter Parker, please send me to Hawaii. Quote. Okay. Peter Parker used the space gem again. Meanwhile, on the moon, trapped inside a crater, Killian is forced to crawl forward, but every time he dies of suffocation, he slides down the mountain again. Although Killian was desperate, he did not give up. He was such a person who would not change his purpose at any time. I don't know how long it took, but Kieran woke up after not knowing how much he suffocated, and suddenly found that he had climbed out of the crater and was located on a plane. But just when Killian thought that he was climbing out of the crater by his own strength, he was stunned to find a flying machine next to him. You're awake. The door to the craft opened, and Loki stepped forward and asked with a smile. Woo. Oh yes, sorry, I forgot you can't breathe. Loki left laughing and returned to the craft, and when Kieran was unconscious again due to suffocation and then woke up again, Loki put a helmet on Killian's head. Phew. After finally being able to breathe, Kieran took a sharp breath of air, then slowed down, looked at Loki and asked, who are you? It doesn't matter who I am, what matters is that you have to work for me. Loki laughed. By what? Killian stood up, took a few steps back, and looked at Loki with a look at him. His goal was to conquer the world and become the master of the planet, not to serve anyone. That's it. The Loki in front of him suddenly disappeared from Killian's field of vision, and when he reacted and looked back, Loki put the psychic scepter against Killian's back. For a moment, Ji Lien was stunned, and when he finally had a reaction, he looked at Loki and bowed. My master, I obey you. Quote. Good. Loki smiled and patted Kieran's shoulder before strode back to the aircraft. This is an alien aircraft, stolen by Loki, and there is an alien pilot attached to the aircraft, of course, like Killian, who has been rewritten with consciousness and absolute allegiance to Loki. If I'm not mistaken in the harbor, you're trying to kill Stark, right? Sitting in the transport compartment of the plane, Loki asked to the opposite Killian. That's right, I'm going to let him die a tragic death, not just Stark, but also the Avengers. Killian said through gritted teeth. I also want to, but the problem is that the Avengers don't know what's going on, and suddenly as if they have the ability to predict the future, they can seize the opportunity everywhere, and even have two artifacts, which is simply strange. Loki muttered doubts, then looked at Killian and said firmly, anyway, no matter what, If we fight alone, we can't deal with the Avengers at all, so we must unite, and we will go to Earth next to do this. Who else is going to deal with the Avengers besides us? Killian showed a puzzled expression. No, the people on Earth are not very ambitious, and there are very few people who want to deal with the Avengers directly, but there are too many people who want to deal with Stark. Loki said with a smile. Hearing his words, Killian was a little confused, but because the spirit gem made him absolutely obey, he didn't express any objections at all. The two returned to Earth in a flying machine. A week later. After this week-long vacation, Stark looked refreshed and had a much closer relationship with Pepper. The two eliminated the gap that had occurred because Stark was only busy with the Avengers and snubbed Pepper. Say, what's the matter with calling me over today? Stark put his legs on the conference table and asked without lifting his head while chatting with Pepper on his phone. Seeing his reaction, Nick Fury looked dissatisfied, but there was nothing to say, just said to the others, "The matter of Killian has almost been resolved. I think in the next few days, there will be multiple choice questions, you pay more attention." Saying that, Nick Fury's gaze instantly shifted to Peter Parker's body and warned, "Someone must not run over and mess things up by himself without telling others about multiple choice questions as they did at the beginning." Quote. Well, Director Fury is right. Peter Parker pretends not to be talking about him, but he knows full well that Nick Fury is just referring to him. This also starts from the very beginning, when the Avengers were only Peter Parker. At that time, he once appeared alone in a multiple-choice question about Dr. Lizard, and he wanted to solve the matter alone because he didn't want Nick Fury to interfere with S.H.I.E.L.D. But as it turned out, he still screwed up. Dr. Lizard almost got out of control, but was eventually caught by Stark with anti-Hulk armor. And then there's the next thing. Nick Fury took out a long memorandum paper, and just as he was about to read the content on it, he felt a blur in front of his eyes, and then a small text appeared in his line of sight. Avengers new member related missions. One of the Avengers, the most powerful Scarlet Witch Wanda, why did she gain great power? A. She was born to a gypsy witch, so she has the power to modify probability since she was a child. B. She was kidnapped and transformed by the Supreme Evolution. C. After seeing Stark missiles destroy her home, she voluntarily joins Hydra's transformation experiment and is inspired by her innate power with mind gems. D. She is born with the ability to use abilities. Answer correctly, reward Power Gem 1. Wrong answer, the Infinity Gauntlet holder is violently killed along with Wanda and Quicksilver. It seems obvious that this is another topic that requires human life as a bargaining chip. Nick Fury said a little helplessly. The difficulty of the magic multiple choice question seems to be constantly increasing. As early as the beginning, it was only a 10-year loss of life or something, but now it has become a direct violent death, and it is violent death at every turn. Either one person is violently killed, or several people are violently killed. All in all, the risks involved in doing the problem are increasing, but with it, the benefits are also increasing. For example, Mjolnir, Infinity Gauntlet, this time the question will directly give a power gem. I don't know what the power gem is, but I guess it should be the same as the space gem, which can be set on gloves and give some kind of magical power. Steve speculated. Let's save that kid's life first. Stark glanced at Peter Parker worriedly and looked at everyone. This is a choice that Peter Parker will violently kill if he chooses the wrong one. I think it's option A. This person named Scarlet Witch is a member of the next Avengers. This code name should be given by us, so inference, she should be a witch, so it should be born of the Gypsy Witch. Steve speculated. Maybe it's. No, absolutely not. The title says that Scarlet Witch is the Avenger with the greatest potential. If it is really born of a witch, it should be the power of inheriting her mother, but the problem is that if her mother can inherit her daughter's strong potential, it should be even weaker in strength, but how can we not find such a number one? Bruce speculated at length. Hearing this, Steve was directly silent, feeling that what Bruce said made sense. If the power comes from the mother, it must be genetics, and the mother must have strong potential, and such a person cannot hide it in any way. So a thought that it could be eliminated directly. Option B, kidnapped by the Supreme Evolution. We don't know what the hell this is, let's put it on hold first. Nick Fury said. Option C, she volunteered to join Hydra's experiment. Stark muttered the topic, and then pondered for a while before saying, "What do you think the name Wanda is like?" "As far as I know, there should be no such naming habit on our side, so it should be somewhere else, maybe East and West Europe, or the Middle East." "What is this for, you ask?" Steve asked rhetorically. "This option C says that Wanda was destroyed by a missile and voluntarily joined Hydra's experiment, obviously for a purpose, such as gaining power, but why would she want to gain power? I think it's because of revenge, inferred from her name, maybe from a war-torn area, for some reason to take revenge on the enemy." Stark reasoned about all possibilities. In the end, he suddenly thought of a very terrible answer, and said stunned, "The option says that Wanda saw the missiles produced by Stark Industries, the missiles produced by my company a few years ago. Basically any war-torn area has been blown up. Will it one day fall in a civilian area? Will there be children surviving? And..." In the end, Stark no longer wanted to say more. He realized something terrifying, that is, it was possible that because of the missiles he sold a few years ago, he destroyed the home of 2 innocent children, and then they joined Hydra in order to avenge themselves. This is a sinful thing. Stark, don't think so, maybe option D is the right answer. Thor comforted. "No, if it's option D, a child is born with powerful abilities, then she would have come and beat Stark to death, and she wouldn't be able to keep it now." Nick Fury spoke the truth, and then ordered, "It must be option C, just choose C." Quote. Chosen correctly. As the multiple choice question disappeared from everyone's sight, a purple gemstone landed on the conference table. "Put it on and try it," Nick Fury commanded. Peter Parker then picked up the power gem and set it on his Infinity Gauntlet. A purple energy instantly wrapped around Peter Parker's body, causing him to whimper in pain a few times before he adapted to this energy. How? What is the power of this gem? Seeing that Peter Parker gradually adapted, Nick Fury immediately asked questions about the power gem, wanting Peter Parker, the most intuitive feeler, to answer questions. "It's a strange feeling, it's like an electric current passing through me, and it's painful, but it's also a little comfortable because it's the satisfaction of great power." Peter Parker's explanation is a bit ambiguous, and the people who hear it are "you look at me, I look at you, and I don't understand much." Seeing their doubts, Peter Parker did not explain much, because this feeling can only be experienced by wearing gloves in person. "Let's let you take the initiative to test it." Nick Fury immediately brought Peter Parker and the others to the training ground, where the lizard monsters were created by cloning Dr. Lizard's genes. These monsters all look like they are flailing and huge, even stronger than their genoplasm, Professor Connors. "Wait a minute, why are these things happening? What did you do to Professor Connors?" Seeing these large lizards, Peter Parker's first reaction was that S.H.I.E.L.D. might have done something to Connors. This is not impossible. After all, when the Cosmic Cube was still a Rubik's Cube before, S.H.I.E.L.D. studied secret weapons, and now Dr. Lizard Connors has been caught and used by S.H.I.E.L.D. to study some kind of biological weapon, which is not difficult to imagine. We've been working to restore Connors' genes, and in the process we've made some copies of his genes to experiment with the effects of serum. And these replicators can regenerate indefinitely, so what could be more appropriate than using them as targets? You don't have to worry, they have no self-awareness, just a bunch of genetically deteriorated beasts who only know how to kill people. Feeling Peter Parker's deep doubts, Nick Fury quickly explained in order to avoid misunderstandings. Hearing these explanations, Peter Parker nodded, although he was still a little skeptical, but he was also sure that these large lizards were absolutely not self-aware. Because they not only have a fierce eye on themselves, the people present, but even have the idea of devouring their own kind. If it were not for those few iron cables, I am afraid that those big lizards themselves would have cannibalized each other first. We'll open the bar, and then it's up to you. Nick Fury winked at the staff of the training ground, then remembered something, turned his head and instructed, "If you can't beat it, just shout that you can't beat it. Don't force it. These are extraordinary times, and you must not be missing this important combat power." Okay. Peter Parker nodded. In the next second, the area he was in was completely isolated from the area where the others were, and the large lizards also rushed towards Peter Parker after the staff untied the iron cable. There are 8 lizards in total. When these big lizards ran, the ground was shaking, and you can imagine how powerful they would be. Things changed when they saw that these big lizards were about to rush to Peter Parker and about to devour him alive. On the Infinity Gauntlet worn by Peter Parker, the purple power gem shone, and in the next second, Parker directly swung his gloved fist violently. This punch directly hit the closest lizard. The purple energy spread. The big lizard was directly knocked upside down and flew out tens of meters away, and then hit the wall hard. The bones all over the body were shattered, and the body was almost shattered by the powerful force. Not only the lizard that was hit, but the other 7 similar species behind the lizard, just by the aftermath, also hit the wall and shattered their bones. These lizards originally had a strong regenerative ability, but this regeneration ability is a joke for power gems. Want to regenerate? I wonder if I can regenerate by breaking you into cakes directly. After all, what Professor Connors came up with was not a desperate virus, nor a super self-healing gene, just an ordinary lizard ability. What a terrifying power! Peter Parker exclaimed, then gathered his strength and punched forward again. Although there are no more enemies ahead, Peter Parker does this to test his strength, as long as he can see the walls shatter or cracks. However, this punch directly pierced the alloy wall outside the shield training ground several times, and the outermost energy shield used to isolate the outside world was directly shattered. This is the power gem. The power of this punch is comparable to the level of armor-piercing shells, and it can directly shatter the energy shield. Nick Fury said, stunned. The other members of the Avengers also looked like they had seen a ghost. This power gem was too terrifying, such a powerful power, it made people feel powerful and terrifying. But fortunately, this power is controlled by Peter Parker. This kind person is completely unwilling to kill, and will even avoid hurting people to a large extent, but there is no need to worry about him abusing his power. It seems that the Infinity Gauntlet will still have to be handed over to you for safekeeping in the future. Nick Fury completely handed over the Infinity Gauntlet to Peter Parker. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., although he fully trusted the Avengers, he also had to think more. The Infinity Gauntlet is an artifact that should be kept by Thor, but Thor is not an Earthling after all, and there is no reason for him to sacrifice for the Earth. Therefore, the Infinity Gauntlet is best placed in the hands of the Earthlings. And Steve America has Mjolnir. Stark is still a wearer of armor, and he doesn't need the Infinity Gauntlet at all. Bruce Banner can't control himself when he goes crazy. Hawkeye and Natasha can't withstand the power of the gauntlet. So all things considered, who else could be the best candidate besides Peter Parker? This kid is really the best candidate. Stark also agreed with Nick Fury's decision, and then he remembered something and complained, isn't it a little too easy for us to make a choice about the next member and get the gem? Maybe it's the most difficult thing to pull the Scarlet Witch into the gang compared to the power gem. Natasha said with a smile. However, she didn't know what the specific situation was, just guessing wildly. Okay guys, we must enter combat readiness now. The monitoring department has been operating 24 hours a day. As long as we can find the base of Hydra, we will go and bring Scarlet Witch out immediately. Nick Fury commanded. Yes. Everyone answered in unison. While the Avengers were testing the power gem, Loki and Kieran also came to Earth on a flying machine. When Jillian was in charge of the AIM organization, he had dealings with Hydra, so the two quickly found a member of Hydra and then exercised mind control over him. Following this Hydra member, Loki came to a Hydra base. This is a base for cultivating humanoid weapons. We have done a lot of human modification experiments, and there are many people with great power here, but it is difficult to control. The person in charge of the base looked directly at the road under his feet, as if reporting to his boss, and told Loki everything about the base in detail. Uncontrollable. It doesn't matter, what I'm best at is controlling people. Loki smiled grimly, pleased with his luck. This is a big melon that is full of people with special abilities, which is simply a prepared arsenal of weapons, and what humanoid weapons are needed can be directly taken from themselves. This is a relief for Loki, who is now ready to gather strength and fight the Avengers. Master, in front of us are the two most potential experimental subjects in this base. Their strength is very personal, and they absolutely hate Stark, they will not betray it. The person in charge introduced as he led Loki to a room. The room is shrouded in white superalloy, and the doorway is a large heavy iron door, and through the monitor on the iron door, you can see the situation inside. It was a pair of siblings. The younger brother sat next to him stunned, while the older sister used a strange red energy to control a constantly flipping Rubik's Cube, which looked quite interesting. Why is he so potential? Logic asked. The man has the ability to run quickly, but I don't know what use it is for the time being, while the woman has the ability to think, mind control and so on, which is not stable at all, and it is easy to make mistakes. The person in charge replied. Potential, said Loki, then opened the door of the room and walked in, asking the siblings, I heard you hate Stark. Why? Because Stark destroyed our home with a missile. My brother and I hugged each other and looked at the missile that landed in the center of our home, the missile that didn't explode, as if it was about to take our lives at every moment. The woman replied. So it is. Loki smiled with satisfaction. He did not choose to control the spirits of the two siblings, but used the mind gem to stimulate their power. What's your name? Loki asked. My name is Wanda, and my brother's name is Quicksilver. Wanda replied. Very well, Wanda and Quicksilver, you two follow me from today and owe allegiance to me, and I will help you take revenge on Stark and the entire Avengers. Loki promised with a smile. For his promise, Wanda and Quicksilver looked at each other and felt that there was no problem. The two hate Stark so much that they can take the initiative to find Hydra and ask Hydra to experiment on them. That can of course also be loyal to Loki. Now I'm going to give you an order. Loki suddenly pointed to the person in charge behind him and ordered, kill him for me. As soon as the order came out, Quicksilver still hesitated, while Wanda did not hesitate to use the ability towards the person in charge. The man floated directly, his body was wrapped in a red energy, and then Wanda slowly pulled, and the body of the person in charge made a tooth-biting clicking sound. In the end, it was completely divided into 7. After killing him, Wanda did not feel the slightest sense of guilt. This person in charge in her eyes was a scumbag, not only abused the experimental subjects at will, but also sent their sister and brother's good friends to the battlefield to die. Compared to Stark, he deserved to die. Very powerful ability, if only it could fuse with my desperate virus. Korean suggested. Absolutely, haven't you done research? In the future, this Hydra's base will be yours, and you can study it as much as you want. Loki agreed. 2 weeks later, while the space carrier was heading towards a target location, all the members of the Avengers also gathered on the mothership. They were fully armed, sitting in their positions one by one, listening to the information about the battle. Our target is a forest 200 kilometers away. It is a primeval forest, very secret, but we still found out. Your mission is to raid the Hydra base that exists in that primeval forest. I suspect that our next member, that is, Wanda, should be in the base. Nick Fury informed everyone of the information, ordered the combat deployment, and everything only waited for the arrival of the space carrier and the operation began. Don't worry, Fury, this incident is nothing compared to the invasion of the Chitauri, we can easily solve them. Stark said unconcernedly. I know you're all very capable, but at least pay attention. Nick Fury instructed, and then went to the bridge to prepare to command the crowd to fight. A moment later, the space carrier arrived above the base, and the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. combatants all poured out and arrived on the ground battlefield in a transport plane. At this time, the Hydra base also had defenders, but they didn't expect S.H.I.E.L.D. to suddenly invade, so they were all quite scattered, until one person was directly stunned by Steve with a shield, and the others reacted. Enemy attack. A shout sounded, followed by a shrill siren from the base, and a large number of Hydra fighters poured out of the base and came to the combat site to join the battle. There is even a specially modified tank carrying an energy weapon that joins the battle and fires at the transporter. This shot is an energy ball. This energy ball is very fast. At this time there are other Avengers who did not get down from the transport plane. If hit, it is likely to hurt many people. At this critical moment, Peter Parker swung a punch directly towards the energy ball, and the energy emitted by the power gem directly pushed the energy ball back. Rumble. The tank was hit by the energy ball and the energy of the power gem one after another, and after a direct explosion, it was curled up into a piece of scrap iron. But their driver was also quick and ran straight out before the explosion. I'll help you. After solving the tanks, Peter Parker walks through the battlefield, constantly using the power of the power gem to stun the enemies he encounters, rather than kill them. Don't kill, try not to hurt people, that's Peter Parker's bottom line. Although this made Steve, who had experienced real battlefields and even brutal battles, Not very satisfied, he thought about it. Peter Parker really needed such a bottom line. Otherwise, a person with unlimited gloves, if he does not maintain the principle of non-killing, he may directly become a terrorist executioner, rather than a righteous member of a righteous group. However, Steve also worries that if Peter Parker experiences some setbacks, or if someone he cherishes is hurt, will he turn his romance and become extreme and angry? The answer is that of course it is possible. But as Peter Parker's teammate and mentor like Stark, Steve can only try to avoid Peter Parker's huge setbacks and blows. Captain, back off. At this time, Peter Parker did not know what Steve was thinking. He shouted for Steve to retreat, and then landed in front of everyone, throwing a punch at the large number of enemies that were rapidly surging directly ahead. The power gem flickered, and this punch was endowed with great power, and a burst of energy spread directly from the ground, knocking all those people to the ground, and there was no way to get up in a short time. Such a powerful power made everyone look sideways, and Peter Parker was slightly careful, and touched the gloves beautifully. This battle scene was not only seen on the Avengers' side, but also on Loki's side. Power gem. Loki's face couldn't believe it, his eyes staring at the screen were about to fall out. At this time he was extremely shocked, he never expected that a month later, the Avengers actually got the power gem. No. Wrong. Isn't this power gem in the hands of the Kree? How did the Avengers get it? Could it be that they went to Kree Star and took the gems? Can't it? The Kree are also a war empire, so easily defeated by a few Earthlings and take away the power gem. Loki muttered to himself like crazy, talking for a long time, reasoning for a long time, and couldn't understand how this power gem appeared and how it was obtained by the Avengers. It was like the Infinity Gauntlet, appearing out of thin air, as if someone had brushed it out for them. But there is no way, even if the enemy has a power gem, then you have to continue fighting. Power gems. That Spider-Man's control of the power gem is still very immature, and he can't even exert 1% of his strength, and now let Wanda pass, you can still fight. While talking to himself, Loki looked at Wanda and Quicksilver behind him and ordered, "You two go immediately, the main target is the guy with the gloves, Quicksilver, you snatch the gloves for me." Quote. Understood. Wanda and Quicksilver bowed slightly, and then left Loki's sight together. At the same time, just as the Avengers entered the base and were about to enter the underground area, a woman dressed in red suddenly walked out from the underground. In the dark environment, the woman's left and right hands, as well as her eyes, were flashing with red light, and she didn't look like an ordinary person. Parker. Stark shouted at Peter Parker, no doubt to hurry up and use the Infinity Gauntlet to test the strength of the woman in front of him. Needless to say, Parker had already thought of it, and he directly used the power gem to shoot an energy towards Wanda. This energy rushed towards Wanda, but her face did not change, and she quickly waved out both hands at the same time, and a red energy collided with the energy of the power gem, spreading, and pushed everyone present backwards a few meters. Sure enough, you're not very skilled yet. Loki, who looked at the battle situation, smiled with satisfaction, glad that Peter Parker was not Thanos, otherwise Wanda would have been beaten into minced meat by the power gem just now. At the same time that the Avengers were sliding backwards because of the energy collision just now, a figure quickly appeared and rushed towards Peter Parker. The figure is so fast that the naked eye can't see clearly. It is Quicksilver. If it is someone else, I am afraid that Quicksilver will punch it, but Peter Parker has spider sensing. When Quicksilver approached Peter Parker, reached out and grabbed the Infinity Gauntlet, and was about to take it off, Peter Parker had already sensed it and had already reacted. Rumble. Purple energy spread out from the glove, and Quicksilver was directly flipped out and fell violently towards the rear. Since this is Peter Parker's instinct, he has no control power, causing Quicksilver to burst out directly like a bullet, and if it hits something, it must be the end of crushing bones. Just then, Wanda used her ability to catch her younger brother. After one move, neither side took advantage of anything, so they could only take 2 steps back, open the fight and prepare to fight again. However, in the next second, in the eyes of the Avengers, Wanda suddenly disappeared. But in fact, Wanda did not disappear, he just confused everyone's sight, and then took advantage of this time to come to Peter Parker and use hallucinogenic magic on him. Wait a minute, Gwen. Peter Parker suddenly exclaimed. The Avengers next to them did not hear Peter Parker's shouts at all, because they were isolated by Wanda. While using the illusion, Peter Parker sees his favorite female classmate Gwen, who is smiling at him. However, in the next second, the surrounding environment changed and turned into a clock tower. Inside the bell tower, Gwen grasped a thin spider silk, and tens of meters below was hard ground. Peter Parker reaches out to grab Gwen, but is stopped by a man dressed in green, and the two fight, touching the gears of the bell tower in the fight. The gears run, the spider silk breaks, and Gwen falls directly down. Peter Parker jumped down without hesitation, ejecting a spider silk to save Gwen, but because of inertia, Gwen eventually fell to the ground and fell heavily. Nope. Witnessing Gwen's death, Peter Parker roared, turned and punched the man in green above. This punch is wearing the Infinity Gauntlet. A roar sounded, and a purple energy was emitted from the Infinity Gauntlet, destroying an entire bell tower while hitting the man in green, directly penetrating his body. This is an illusion, and in reality, Wanda was directly hit by Peter Parker's fist, and an energy penetrated through the body, directly knocking Wanda unconscious on the spot, unconscious. The illusion was lifted, and everyone immediately reacted and looked at Wanda, who had fallen to the ground. But just as they were about to step forward to check on the situation, Quicksilver suddenly appeared, picked Wanda up and hurried away. Failed. Seeing that Quicksilver disappeared with Wanda, Loki muttered and turned off the monitor, leading Killian beside him to the landing area of the aircraft. This base has no way to defend, it is inevitable to be captured by the Avengers, and if you stay here any longer, I am afraid that there is only one way to die. Although he won't really die, he is taken back to Asgard by Thor and imprisoned, a punishment that is worse for Loki than dead. What exactly is that glove, and why does it contain so much power? Killian remembered Peter Parker and asked Loki. It's not that the glove is powerful, but there is a power gem on the glove, and the power gem is powerful. He can beat you into powder with one punch, so that you have no way to regenerate and resurrect at all. Loki explained with a frown. Then won't we be defeated? Kieran was a little frustrated. He originally thought that he and Loki had robbed this base, found two very powerful subordinates, and a large group of Hydra people, and it would not be a problem to take direct revenge on Stark. But now it seems like a dream, and the Avengers are far more powerful than they thought, especially the guy with the gloves. Not necessarily. That Peter Parker's power for gloves, I'm afraid it's less than 1%, we still have a chance. Loki recalled. Then the two stopped talking, quickly boarded the aircraft, and then waited for Quicksilver, who came back with Wanda, to enter the aircraft, and left together. Loki knows that the Infinity Gauntlet Peter Parker is wearing has space gems, so he orders the pilot to fly close to the ground, trying not to expose the aircraft to Peter Parker's field of vision. Otherwise, the Avengers will be in trouble teleporting directly to the aircraft. Meanwhile, the Avengers sighed. After capturing the base, SHIELD fighters immediately captured everyone in the base and made them gather in a row, waiting to be tied up at any time. The Avengers, on the other hand, stood aside, quietly observing the base while resting for a while. Did you find out? The people of Hydra who fought with us are very loyal, that is, those who have not surrendered until now, and there were even suicide attacks long ago. Steve said, pointing to the bodies of several Hydra personnel. Listening to his words, others also felt suspicious. Hydra is a very shy organization, but that is only the magic of the superiors, and the lower personnel are mostly mercenaries, mixed with food, and do not believe in the purpose of Hydra. So in such organizations, no one usually pays with their lives for him, but before they encountered suicide attackers. You mean, they're all mind-controlled? Stark asked. It is quite possible that perhaps it is now that the mind controller has left, which led to these people gradually recovering themselves, and only then those who surrendered appeared. Steve said, pointing to those who had surrendered. These people looked very frightened, one by one, afraid that they would be sentenced to a heavy sentence by SHIELD. But just now, even these surrenderers, one by one, fought very bravely, and those who went forward to charge one after another did not look like cowards like now. Apart from Loki, there should be no one else who can control minds on such a large scale, right? But this guy is still locked up. Thor said puzzled. Just yesterday, he also visited his fuel-saving brother, so his first reaction was that it had nothing to do with Loki. You also know that no one else has such massive mind control other than him, so I suspect Loki has left the space carrier. Steve analyzed. Don't bother so much, Thor, let me ask you something. Has Loki taken the initiative to find you recently? Stark asked. If you took the initiative to find me, of course you haven't. Thor shook his head. Don't you think Loki is such a reassuring guy who can stay in prison on a space carrier for so long without doing anything? Stark asked again. This question made Thor suddenly realize, he couldn't help nodding, and said in a deep voice, after being quiet for so long, then I estimate that the prison is definitely a fake Loki. The conversation between the three was overheard by the others, and the other Avengers were genuinely worried. Loki is really unconscious, either doing things, or on the way to doing things. He has provoked such a dangerous enemy, and he really doesn't know what to say. Thor, next time you catch Loki, you must get him back to Asgard. The prisons of the Earthlings are small, and they can't keep such a big god. Nick Fury said to Thor, then looked at Peter Parker and ordered, there is nothing to find in this base, send us back. Good. Quote. Peter Parker nodded, clenched his fists, and in the next second teleported directly back to the right above S.H.I.E.L.D. along with the space carrier. The purpose of this raid on the base was originally to rescue the witch Wanda and his brother Quicksilver, but now Wanda and Quicksilver are nowhere to be seen, and it is clear that they are hostile to the Avengers, so the target fails. But even if it fails, this time the gain is not small. The first is the experimental subjects in the Hydra base, and a small number of these experimental subjects are like normal people or have consciousness, and most of them are monsters who have no self-awareness and will only indulge in killing. For the disposal of these monsters, S.H.I.E.L.D. will try to study antidotes to make them turn back into humans, and if they can't change back, they can only be sent for execution. The monsters who were about to be executed were escorted by Peter Parker and Stark. Don't worry, these guys are indeed miserable enough, but they have become monsters, they have no other ability than slaughtering humans, and they are also tormented by the pain of genetic modification. For them, death is a relief. Stark comforted the depressed Peter Parker beside him and looked down at Peter Parker thoughtfully on the ground. No, I'm not thinking about these monsters, I'm thinking about what I saw after that witch Wanda used magic on me. Peter Parker whispered. What is it? Stark asked. Peter Parker wanted to answer, but he didn't say anything and disguised. It's nothing, I don't know what to say. If you don't want to say it, don't say it. You have a lot of credit for attacking the Hydra base this time, go and rest for a while and relax your mood. Stark said and took a credit card from his pocket and put it in Peter Parker's hand. The meaning was clear, that is, let him go on vacation to spend. Thank you, Mr. Stark. Peter Parker politely thanked him, did not refuse, took the credit card and left S.H.I.E.L.D. After coming out of S.H.I.E.L.D., Peter Parker returned home. He is not a playboy, he does not have so many friends. Stark gave him a credit card. The reason why he did not refuse is because he does not know how to spend it. He can't spend a few dollars at all, and he doesn't need to refuse at all. Parker, you're back. Have things gone well with the Avengers lately? Have you been hurt? As soon as she saw Peter Parker, Aunt May immediately asked the East and West enthusiastically, checked Parker's body left and right, and only let go after seeing that he was not injured. Since joining the Avengers, Peter Parker can only take time to go to school, let alone go home, and can only come back to see Aunt May after a while. But Aunt May didn't think it was anything. As her late husband said, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility, and Peter Parker should have this responsibility. I recently took a vacation, and now I finally have time to catch up on my studies. Peter Parker said with a smile. The next period of time means that he will return to life, and unless there is something particularly big on the Avengers side, it will generally not bother him. That's fine. I read in the news, the current Avengers have everything, and it is really a powerful organization. Aunt May said. Yes, very powerful. Peter Parker doesn't deny the power of the Avengers, but the stronger the alliance, the more he fears that he will become famous. Originally, he exposed his identity early, and now he has joined the Avengers, which may offend a lot of people, so isn't Aunt May dangerous at that time? Not just Aunt May, but Gwen, Mary Jane, Lightning Thompson. These people are people close to Parker, and if someone wants to attack Parker, it will inevitably hurt these people around them. After thinking about it like this, Peter Parker's mind returned to the time of attacking the base, and the time when Wanda invaded his brain and gave him visions. Thinking of this, Peter Parker shook his head vigorously, shaking these terrible thoughts out of his mind. At least things haven't deteriorated too badly yet, and Peter Parker can comfort himself that what he sees is nothing more than an illusion. What's wrong with you? Seeing that Peter Parker was suddenly silent for a long time, Aunt May asked with concern. Nothing. Peter Parker shook his head and went back to his bedroom, lying on the bed intending to take a break. But at this moment, he suddenly saw some words appear in front of him, just like the previous multiple-choice question. This made Peter Parker sit up instinctively, and then quickly took out the communicator, wanting to discuss this latest multiple-choice question with the Avengers everyone. But at this moment, a new line of words appeared in the multiple-choice question. Multiple-choice questions, don't tell others, otherwise you will die. Seeing this, Peter Parker quickly put the communicator down, looked at the topic alone, and prepared to do this multiple-choice question. In the fate of Spider-Man Peter Parker, whose death greatly changed him. A. Aunt May. B. Uncle Ben. C. Mary Jane. D. Gwen. Select failure, deduct 10 days of life. Choose correctly and reward the opportunity to ask a question once. Do you still need to ask? Of course B. Peter Parker will never forget the death of his Uncle Ben, and the words that the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility, which was crucial to his impact and made Peter Parker determined to become Spider-Man. This is simply a subtopic. In fact, it is also true, this topic is done wrong, that is, 10 days of life deduction, which is not a big problem. And if you do it right, you can get a reward for the opportunity to ask questions. What does this mean? Peter Parker does not understand. After he made the right choice, the title disappeared and a new line of words emerged. You get the opportunity to ask a question once. You can ask me a question, and I will answer you anything, but only 3 questions. Quote. Question you. You have an ego. Before the 2 words of consciousness behind could be spoken, Peter Parker quickly covered his mouth, afraid that his subconscious words would be taken as a question, reducing the opportunity to ask a question. Then he pondered for a while, and after thinking about it himself, he asked, Magic choice question, can you tell me more about you? Quote. Absolutely. 4 words emerged. Then Peter Parker heard the voice. The voice was thick and ethereal, echoing in his ears like a god. I don't call it a magic multiple choice question, and I forgot my name, but I can tell you that I can do anything. I can control the direction of your world, and anyone, even those ancient gods, I can be at my mercy. Quote. So powerful. Peter Parker was stunned, then thought about it, and felt that it was really like this. Mjolnir is an artifact, the Infinity Gauntlet is an artifact, and the Power Gem is an artifact among artifacts. These 3 things, whichever you want to collect, it costs a lot to pay. But for Peter Parker, he got it by answering questions. After thinking about it, Peter Parker asked again, the reason why you only give us multiple choice questions is because in your eyes we are the righteous party and need support. No, I don't care about justice and injustice, I only care if your world is interesting, and if necessary, I will not hesitate to give Thanos a multiple choice question, even Loki. The voice replied. Well, then it seems that we will not have smooth sailing in the future. Peter Parker said thoughtfully, then paused, pondered for a moment, and asked the last question, is Gwen really going to die? Yes, she will not only die, but also fall from a high place, crush her bones, and her internal organs will be shattered, and you will not be able to revive her by any means. The voice replied coldly, as if death meant nothing to him, just a pawn or something that didn't even count as a pawn. At this point, the 3 questions are asked. When Peter Parker knew that Gwen would die, he couldn't hold back the doubt and anxiety in his heart, and asked, please tell me why Gwen died like that, please. After hearing such a request, the voice did not answer, as if thinking. In the end, he seemed to think it would be more interesting, so he said, I'll tell you, your Gwen will die because of evil people. In addition, I will give you a word, the world you are in is a world of fusion, you will encounter many things that you can't think of, be careful with your life, don't die so quickly. With that, the voice completely dissipated. Evil people. Peter Parker murmured, looking out the window, he was a little dazed, but also a little reasonable. He joined the Avengers with such swagger and showed up everywhere, how could he not offend others? Either to deal with him, or to disgust him, those people may do very extreme things. Thinking so, Peter Parker's brows furrowed and he looked at the Infinity Gauntlet beside him. After a long time, he said to himself, I am not a cruel person, and I don't want to hurt anyone, but if I hurt people to protect a good person, then I will choose to do it. Quote. The next day, Midtown High School. Peter Parker was chatting with Gwen, and the two had not seen each other for a while, and when she saw Parker suddenly appear at school, Gwen was naturally overjoyed. Just as the two of them were having fun talking, Lightning Thompson came over and placed a rough-drawn table in front of Peter Parker. Hey, Spider-Man, we have a lot of super villains in Queens. These guys make the police department in Queens miserable. How about you show off your skills since you're back? Thompson looked at Peter Parker with adoration and trust. This guy was originally a school bully and often bullied Peter Parker, but was later beaten by the mutated Parker and was honest. And he is actually a fanatic fan of Spider-Man, so after learning that Parker is Spider-Man, he immediately worshipped this idol. Thompson, you don't think joining the Avengers is busy enough, do you? Gwen looked at Thompson dissatisfied and said. It's okay. Peter Parker waved his hand, picked up the rough form, looked at it carefully and said, I recently took a vacation, and I just have time to deal with these people. Quote. There are a lot of people recorded on the form. Since the Avengers have gathered the most powerful heroes, and they are either busy dealing with alien invasions or evil organizations such as Hydra and AIM, there is no time to deal with some small criminals with horns. This has led to some criminals with superpowers or special skills being rampant, and even forming a huge underground world. Each villain has its own organization and subordinates, allies and attacks each other. The people on the table are the same people who have recently called for wind and rain in the underground world, such as Dr. Octopus, Sandman or something, and there is also a guy who wears fur and looks like a primitive person. Who is this, role-playing? Peter Parker asked, pointing at the primitive man. No, his name is Hunter Craven, he is the #1 hunter in the world. This is a dangerous man, he claims to hunt you like prey. Thompson explained. A bunch of crazy people. Peter Parker tossed the form aside, but clearly remembered the name on the form in his mind. But exactly what to do, he hasn't figured out yet. Parker, so many people have noticed you, you better not go it alone, it's better to bring your Avenger friends. Gwen said kindly, she was afraid that Peter Parker would get hurt. No, that's not necessary, I have more power now. Peter Parker shook his head, his eyes became firm, and said to Gwen, no matter what, it won't let you have an accident, no matter what. Quote. Night. After the experiment in the school laboratory, it was already past 8 o'clock. Peter Parker and Gwen came out of the lab, said goodbye to each other, and went to their respective homes. However, Peter Parker did not go back directly, but found a building, put on his battle suit, put on the Infinity Gauntlet, and followed Gwen. Along the way, Gwen walked underneath, and Peter Parker wandered above the tall buildings. The view from the tall building was wide, and when Gwen came to a darker place, Peter Parker immediately became alert and observed the situation around him. Finally, he saw Dr. Octopus slowly climbing down with 8 mechanical claws upstairs, like a hunter preying, and 2 mechanical claws stretched out towards Gwen. So it was you. Peter Parker stood up to himself, feeling that he had found his purpose. He followed Gwen to see who would hurt Gwen, and now the target has appeared. What? Gwen, who was advancing, sensed something was wrong with her instincts, looked back, found Dr. Octopus climbing on a tall building, saw 2 mechanical claws reaching towards her, she exclaimed, and quickly fled. But Gwen was not Peter Parker after all, far less experienced and calm, so he panicked and ran to a high wall, and there was no other way. At the same time, not only Dr. Octopus, but others appeared, holding clubs and machetes, and blocked in front of Gwen. Hello, you are Peter Parker's classmate. No, it's a girlfriend, right? I have to say that today's young people are really precocious enough. Otto crawled in front of Gwen, then propped up his body with his octopus claws, looking down at Gwen in the air like a god. No, we haven't decided on the relationship yet. If you want to use me to clamp Parker, that's a dream. Gwen said coldly. Who knows if you don't try? Peter Parker is on vacation and back in Queens. We have to find a way to deal with him, and if you don't get it, then use his Aunt May. Otto said and winked at his men, who quickly stepped forward and tried to grab Gwen. At this moment, more than a dozen cobwebs flew from the air, not hitting Otto, who was dodging away, but hitting those subordinates. Spider-Man. Why are you here? Otto looked at Peter Parker in surprise, then at his gloves, wondering what it was. Unlike the villain of a super organization like Killian, Dr. Octopus is powerful, that is, the leader of a criminal organization, who is not well informed, and naturally does not know what Peter Parker has in his hands. I haven't even met you, so you're going to take Gwen to deal with me, and even Aunt May. You fool. Peter Parker scolded angrily. It's okay, we see it now, I'll divide you into several pieces to study. If I can't beat you, if I can't beat it, I will go to prison, anyway. I won't die, and I will be fished out after a while. You self-proclaimed righteous guys, it's so hypocritical, but there are benefits of hypocrisy, haha. Otto said with a smile. No, I won't make it easy for you. Now seeing that Otto is going to kidnap Gwen, Peter Parker immediately raised his vigilance. Of course he will not beat Otto and send him to prison, he wants to make Otto unable to do bad things again. Making up his mind, Peter Parker directly raised his hand, and while the power gem lit up, Otto was directly wrapped in a purple energy, and then let out a heart-rending scream. On his spine, wrapped in the energy of the power gem, it was gradually collapsing and separating. That mechanical octopus hand was directly ripped off. Nope. My hand. Otto screamed and shouted, of course, not his own arms, but his mechanical octopus claws. For so many years, these octopus claws have been Otto's pride and something he regards as his brothers, and to him, these mechanical octopus claws are even more important than real hands. However, today, these octopus claws were directly ripped off by Peter Parker using the power gem, and they were simple and rude, which is not the same as surgery or some technology to remove the octopus claws. Without the support of the octopus claws, Otto fell from a height and fell to the ground, crawling to his own also fallen octopus claws, crying and holding them. And behind Otto, the device on the spine for installing the octopus claw is bleeding a lot of blood and coolant, as well as things like the lubricating oil used by the octopus claw. Otto, I didn't kill you, and you're already out of evil. Peter Parker lowered his arm and said coldly. Nope. This is not the normal process. According to the normal process you should stick me with a cobweb, then send me to prison, and then I will stay for a while and come out when I have a plan, not like now. Otto said angrily. He really didn't expect that when he heard about Peter Parker's deeds, he didn't kill and tried not to hurt people, but although he was not killed in this first meeting, he was also injured. The octopus claw is roughly pulled out of the spine, which will cause irreversible damage to Otto's nerve center, and from now on, his legs or hands will always have some problems. Don't tell you, I originally planned to deal with you people like this, but I recently received a prophecy, and there is no way to continue playing with you like this. As he spoke, Peter Parker ejected cobwebs with his left hand, glued Otto tightly to the ground, and then took out the phone and called the police. After doing all this, Peter Parker led Gwen away. After the two of them left, Otto gritted his teeth and looked at Peter Parker's back, then picked up the octopus claw that had fallen, manually opened one of the cutting tools inside, cut the cobwebs on his body, and then quickly held the octopus claw and left. At this time, Peter Parker did not know that Otto had escaped, and he held Gwen all the way, using spider silk to shuttle back and forth between high-rise buildings, until he reached the top floor of the place where she lived. Help me, I can't stand steadily. After coming out of Peter Parker's arms, Gwen almost fell and was held by Peter Parker to stabilize. However, although the journey just now is very thrilling, it is also very exciting, but not all kinds of people will have such an experience. So even though Gwen's heart was beating non-stop, she was very happy and excited. Actually, I don't have to wander around so much, there is a better way. As if showing off, Peter Parker raised his right arm, and then after the space gem on the Infinity Gauntlet lit up, the two came to a sandy beach together. At this time, there was no one on the beach, and the sun in the sky was hanging high and very dazzling. Wait, what kind of alien space is this? Why is it night over there and noon here? Gwen asked in a panic, and she was even more surprised why Peter Parker had this ability. This is an island in the Pacific Ocean. What I see when I watch the news. This is another latitude. We are there at day, here is night, and vice versa. Peter Parker explains. It's amazing, it's an island. That is, it's just the two of us on this beautiful beach. Gwen said excitedly as she circled around. Gwen's tutor is very strict. He has rarely left the house, and the beach can only be seen when traveling with his parents, but now the attractions are full everywhere and everywhere. It was the first time she and Peter Parker had seen the beach. This is my secret base. We can find a time to come over for a day, swim, eat coconut crab, build a log cabin or something. Peter Parker was a little embarrassed and twisted to invite Gwen. Of course you can. Gwen couldn't wait to agree, and then she remembered something and said eagerly, now let's go back first, my parents may be in a hurry. Of course. Peter Parker's mind moved, and the next second the two people returned to the building through the ability of the space gem. Goodbye. Gwen turned away, walked not far, turned back and said, even if you can teleport, but you are Spider-Man Peter Parker after all, if you are not very anxious, isn't it good to swing around with spider silk? With that, she smiled and turned to leave. After watching Gwen disappear, Peter Parker turned around and used the space gem to return to his home. Today he was glad that he had left an extra eye to follow Gwen, and he was glad that he had shot Otto down in time, and the things that might lead to Gwen's death were avoided. After solving a major problem, Peter Parker fell asleep. One day later, inside a craft counterfeiting factory in Queens. In the decorated golden conference room, a group of people sat upright, and although they each had hostility to each other, they chose to temporarily join forces for the greater threat. Bang bang. There was a knock on the door, then the door was opened, and Otto entered the conference room in a wheelchair and said to everyone, sorry, I'm a little late. It's okay, after all, you fought with the current Peter Parker and were injured, we should wait for you a little longer, hurry up and take a seat. Kimon said, sitting on the throne. Immediately Otto entered the position, swept around, and saw many old faces, such as Golden and Sandman, Scorpion, Mysterio, Rhino Man, Vulture and so on, and other gang bosses who were also crawling in the underground world. In order to deal with Spider-Man who suddenly returned home, the underground world of Queens District directly gathered, no matter how he fought on weekdays, fighting for a blushing face and a thick neck, but now he must join forces. Before Peter Parker left Queens to join the Avengers, we hadn't met him, we had only heard about his deeds, and this is a man who won't deal with him. Otto, tell me what you saw yesterday. Kim merged. I fought Peter Parker yesterday. He is now very strong and has not followed the rules of non-harm. He directly ripped my octopus claw out of my spine, paralyzing both of my legs. Otto said with a calm face. But everyone who listens can feel how desperate it is to feel what happened yesterday. Thanks for watching.